Anastasia was 33 when she realized that some people confuse blood relation with entitlement. I had always believed that no one could force me to give my time, my peace, and my energy to anyone, especially not someone who had never given me any of those things back. But what happened during what was supposed to be a quiet, well-earned vacation turned into one of the most horrifying experiences of my life. This is not just a story about refusing to babysit. It is a story about how a careless man's temper and a taxi driver's error nearly led to a tragedy, and how I, the woman everyone thought would do nothing, moved mountains to fix it. It all started when I told my brother Mark that I would not be babysitting his children during my 1 week off. I had made that decision calmly after years of being treated like an unpaid nanny whenever he or his wife needed to escape. I had plans. Plans that didn't involve diaper bags, crying toddlers, or waking up in the middle of the night to soothe nightmares that were not mine to carry. When I said no, I did not scream. I did not explain. I simply stated it as a boundary. Mark was furious. He acted as if I had abandoned him in some dire emergency. He sent passive-aggressive messages, wrote long guilt-ridden paragraphs about how families should support each other, and when I didn't respond, he stopped texting altogether. I assumed wrongly that this meant he got the message, that he finally understood the word no. I was halfway into my second day of vacation. Phone on silent, candles lit, finally alone with myself when the disaster was quietly set in motion. I had no idea that somewhere in the city, Mark had called a taxi, shoved his 2 small children inside, and told the driver to take them to his sister's apartment. That's it. No note, no call, no confirmation, just the assumption that he could dump his responsibility on me like a package. But the taxi driver, either through error or laziness, entered the wrong address into the GPS. 1 number off, 1 street too far. And just like that, 2 children under the age of 8 were dropped off in front of a stranger's house and no one realized it. 3 days later, my phone rang. I was cleaning up after breakfast when I saw Mark's name on the screen. I ignored it once, then twice, but something told me to pick up. He was laughing. I could hear the smugness in his voice as he said that he was grateful I had decided to take care of the kids after all, and that he appreciated that I did not make a scene. I froze. Every cell in my body went cold. I asked him as clearly as I could what children he was talking about. He stopped breathing for a second, then he said slowly that he was talking about his children who he had sent to me. I remember gripping the counter with both hands and saying, "I don't have your children." The silence on the other end was pure panic. He stammered something, asked me if I was joking, asked me if I was trying to get back at him. And then when he realized I was dead serious, he screamed that he had put them in a taxi to my apartment 3 days ago. My vision went white. I dropped the phone. I ran to the door. I looked outside. No children, no messages, no note, nothing. I did not love my brother, not in any way that resembled what society expected from me. He was arrogant, entitled, and manipulative. But I loved his children. I loved them in the way someone loves innocence, because I had watched them grow, because they were good despite him, because they reminded me of who I used to be before people taught me to harden, and the idea that they had been missing for 3 whole days made me want to scream into the walls. I picked up the phone and began calling every police contact I had ever made in my life. Old school friends, people I had helped during charity events, officers I had interviewed once for a freelance article. I did not ask, I demanded. I reported the children missing. I gave them the names, their last known clothing, their ages, their allergies, their emergency phrases. Mark sat in stunned silence on the line while I coordinated patrol searches across the districts. I told them I suspected the taxi company. I told them the driver was the last adult contact and that this was a negligence case. Within hours, the police had pulled traffic footage. They tracked down the license plate of the cab. They found the address. It turned out the taxi driver had driven to a similar-sounding street in a completely different part of the city, a quiet residential neighborhood. He had left the children with an older woman who assumed they were the grandchildren of someone nearby. She took them in, gave them food, and waited for someone to come, but no one came. The children, frightened and confused, didn't remember my address or my name. They kept saying "Auntie," and the woman assumed their family was nearby and would show up. When no one did, she continued to feed them, house them, and wait. She never called the authorities. She meant well, but her help had kept them hidden. 3 days. 3 entire days my niece and nephew were in a stranger's house, confused, afraid, unsure if anyone was looking for them. And I, the person who had explicitly said I would not be responsible, became the only person willing to do what needed to be done. Mark watched the entire situation unfold in disbelief. He could not wrap his head around how I had managed to rally a full patrol operation within hours, how I had moved through the system like I had been doing it for years. He called it connections. I called it competence. And he never said thank you. Not once. He was too busy being afraid that he would be reported for child abandonment. Too busy trying to rewrite the story into something less damning. But I never forgot. I never forgot that he put his children in a taxi like they were cargo. I never forgot that he assumed I would be there even after I had told him no, and I never forgot that he laughed when he called, assuming everything had gone his way. I never pressed charges, not because he deserved mercy, but because the children deserved peace. I made sure the police documented everything. I made sure social services knew. I made sure there was a file. To this day, I am haunted by one thought. What if the woman had not been kind? What if the taxi driver had taken a worse wrong turn? What if those children had been left alone on the street? I do not believe in miracles, but I do believe in consequences. Mark faced no legal punishment, but he lost something far greater. My trust, my silence, my presence. And I will never forget the moment I realized that because of a careless taxi driver and an even more careless father, 2 small children spent 3 nights in a house no one knew about, and no one even noticed they were gone. Update 1. I genuinely believe that after everything I had done, after raising the entire local patrol unit, after helping recover 2 lost children with nothing but a street camera frame and my own initiative, the system would recognize that I had saved lives, not endangered them. I had no reason to think otherwise. The officers had shaken my hand when the children were found. They called me a hero, said it was a miracle the kids were safe, praised me for acting quickly while the father, my brother Mark, had done nothing for days but twiddle his thumbs and hope someone else would clean up the mess. I had assumed the aftermath would involve an investigation into the taxi company, maybe even charges against the driver for gross negligence or failure to confirm drop-off details involving minors. But instead, everything turned sideways and fast. It started the moment Mark came to collect the kids. His face was the same combination of arrogance and panic he always wore when he knew he had messed up. He looked at me like he was expecting applause, like I should be grateful he had finally shown up. I stood there silently, waiting for any acknowledgement of what I had done. I thought I would at least hear a thank you, even if it was forced. But no, instead, as soon as he signed the papers releasing the children from temporary custody and the officer handed them over, Mark turned to the lead detective and said something that twisted my entire world into something unrecognizable. He claimed that I had told him I was taking the children for the week. He said he had confirmed it with me, that I had agreed to watch them. He said he had sent them in the taxi because I told him it would be fine, and then I failed to inform anyone that they had not arrived. He said I had ghosted him and that he thought I was simply mad at him and ignoring his texts. I stood in absolute silence, frozen as he fabricated every sentence without a flicker of shame. I thought the police would see through it. I thought the truth would stand on its own. But Mark came prepared. He pulled out a printed message that I had sent a week before, one that said I was not available this week but did not explicitly say no. He twisted it into implied consent. Worse, he forged a second message, one I had never written. That looked like confirmation. It read like I had said to just send them over, and it bore my name, my old number, everything. He must have used an app, some tech I was unaware of, and sent it to himself from a spoofed account. I could tell it was fake. I knew it in my bones, but it looked real enough on paper, and that was all they needed. Within hours, I was no longer the hero. I was the suspect. The shift in the officer's eyes was almost imperceptible at first. 1 minute they were thanking me, the next they were asking me to step aside. They asked if I would mind answering a few questions. I thought they meant general ones, procedural. I thought they were still looking for who to hold accountable. But when they began asking why I had failed to notify Mark of the children's non-arrival, why I had not reported the children missing sooner, why I had not verified their arrival myself if I was expecting them, my stomach sank like a stone in black water. I told them again and again that I never agreed to watch the children, that I had refused, that I had said no. I showed them the original text, the one that clearly stated I would not be taking responsibility, but it was not enough. Mark kept insisting. He painted a picture of a bitter, vindictive sister who had decided to teach him a lesson by ignoring 2 innocent children. And somehow they listened. They nodded when he spoke. They asked me to clarify the inconsistencies. They told me they needed to look into everything more deeply. And then came the moment that shattered whatever faith I had left. A quiet voice, a hand on my wrist, the cold click of steel around my arms. I was being detained for suspicion of child endangerment and negligence. They told me I was not under arrest yet, but that I needed to be held while the situation was evaluated. I could not speak. I could not think. My entire brain emptied in that instant, replaced by a cold numbness. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to laugh and say it was a joke, but his expression was smug and victorious, like he had just dodged a bullet and thrown me in front of it. I did not cry, I did not scream, but I felt the weight of betrayal in every breath. I had saved his children, I had thrown away my peace, my safety, my time, because I cared, and in return, he handed me over to the system like a sacrificial lamb to avoid taking the fall himself. As the officers led me to the car, as they read me my rights and explained what would happen next, I realized that nothing was guaranteed. Not the truth, not justice, not fairness. I was no longer the woman who saved the day. I was now the villain in someone else's cowardly rewrite of the story, and I was shocked to learn that blood does not mean family, not when your own brother is willing to watch you get dragged away in handcuffs just to protect himself. Update 2. The holding cell was small, fluorescent, and stale with the smell of recycled air and rust. I had never been in one before, and I never thought I would be. But there I was, sitting on a cold bench, my jacket confiscated, my shoes taken, and a thin, scratchy blanket wrapped around my knees. 2 full days, 48 hours of humiliation, anger, and boiling betrayal. 2 days of pacing back and forth like a trapped animal while Mark slept in his bed, surrounded by the very children I had risked my peace to save. I did not sleep that first night. I kept playing the scene over and over in my mind. The moment the handcuffs locked, the disbelief in my chest when the officer read the charge, the smug look in Mark's eyes as he watched me being taken. I had thought the worst was over when the children were found. I had thought that relief would follow, that Mark would grovel for forgiveness or at the very least fade into silence. But instead, he twisted the truth so thoroughly that even the police had believed him. By the second morning, I was vibrating with fury. I had stopped crying. The fear had drained from my body and been replaced with something much colder. I realized that I could not rely on anyone else to defend me. No one was going to come and declare my innocence for me. I would have to fight. So, when they brought me into the interrogation room again, I looked them in the eye and demanded a trial. I wanted a full hearing. I wanted every piece of evidence examined. I wanted the judge to see what Mark had done, not just to me, but to his own children. When they granted my request, I felt like I could breathe again. What Mark never understood about me is that I do not forget. I do not forgive easily, and I never walk away from injustice once I have tasted it. Over the following days, I built a case like my life depended on it because it did. I gathered every message, every timestamp, every screenshot of the original conversation that proved I had refused to babysit. I brought in character witnesses, friends who could testify that I had gone on vacation, people who had seen me in another part of town when the children were supposedly under my care. I found a digital forensic expert who confirmed the second message Mark had shown was a forgery. I subpoenaed the taxi company records and proved that Mark had never even called to confirm delivery. He had ordered the cab, shoved the children in, and washed his hands of them. In court, Mark was cocky. He came in with that same air of superiority he always carried, the one that had worked on our parents, our teachers, even his employers for years. He truly believed he could talk his way out of anything. But not this time. Not with me standing across from him, armed with facts, fury, and the burning knowledge that he had tried to ruin me. The judge was not impressed with him. The court saw through the manipulation. It took days, but the truth finally cracked through the performance. And when the verdict was read, when I heard the words that cleared my name and declared Mark negligent, I felt a silence bloom inside me. Quiet and powerful, he had lost. His lies had collapsed under the weight of reality. But it did not end there. Mark thought that once the case was over, he could walk away. He thought I would be satisfied with clearing my name, but I was not. I filed a civil suit for defamation and emotional distress. I requested full compensation for legal fees, lost wages, and damages, and I won. Again, Mark was forced to pay a substantial amount, enough to feel it, enough to know he had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The shock on his face would have been enough for most people, but not for me, because the true consequence came when Child Protective Services opened an investigation. My testimony, the court documents, the proof that he had sent his children off without any adult supervision or even a proper confirmation of their arrival. None of it could be ignored anymore. The agency launched an emergency inquiry. Interviews were held, background checks were updated, witnesses were called, and then it happened. Mark was declared unfit temporarily at first, but when the full report came out and it revealed that this was not the first time he had dumped his children on others without care, when it showed a pattern of abandonment masked as family reliance, the ruling was extended, His children were removed from his custody, placed into emergency foster care, while the system determined whether their mother or any relatives were fit to take them. Mark tried to claim it was unfair. He shouted that I had set him up, that this was vengeance, but no one believed him anymore. He had lost his credibility. He tried to bribe me. He called me days after the court case was closed, begged me to retract the reports, to speak on his behalf. He even offered to transfer money to me, tried to flatter me by saying I had proven how smart and powerful I was, that we could fix this together. But it was too late. There was nothing to fix. He had burned every bridge, and I would never help him hide the flames. I turned him down and blocked every number he used to reach me. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he fell apart after that. Lost his job, went through multiple hearings trying to regain partial custody. Failed each one. He painted me as a villain to anyone who would listen, but no one gave him sympathy. They all knew what he had done. They all remembered that he had handed his children to a taxi driver and never followed up for 3 entire days. I taught him a lesson not through screams or violence or revenge in the dark. I taught him by surviving what he tried to do to me and turning the truth into a weapon sharper than any lie he could fabricate. I taught him that trying to destroy someone with integrity will only expose your own rot. And now, whenever I think about what he did, how he tried to ruin me to save himself, I do not feel bitterness. I feel cold satisfaction, because now he knows what it means to lose something you cannot replace. Because now, at last, he understands what I had to learn the hard way. That blood may bind us by birth, but it does not bind us by loyalty. Update 3. The storm that Mark had created kept unraveling long after the court decisions were made, and his rights as a father were torn apart by his own recklessness. For weeks I thought that was the end of it, that justice had been served, that I could finally exhale and return to my life without constantly carrying the weight of his selfishness. But the final blow did not come from a courtroom. It came from a conversation I never expected. It was his wife. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, pale, visibly shaken, clutching her phone like it had betrayed her. I opened the door, ready for another round of accusations, prepared to defend myself against the firestorm Mark had likely stirred up behind my back, but what she said stunned me to my core. She told me she had no idea any of it had happened. She had been away on a work conference for the week. Mark sent the children away. He told her they were going to his parents' house for a change of scenery. Said he would take care of the transfer himself, that there was no need for her to worry. He even sent her pictures, old ones, staged, timed, pulled from earlier visits to their grandparents' home. She had called once, asked to talk to the kids, and he claimed they were asleep. She believed him. She had no reason not to. Mark had lied to her as smoothly as he had lied to the court, to the police, and to me. When she returned home and discovered that the children were not where she thought they were, and that Mark was missing custody hearings and lying to every government agency imaginable, she cracked. She started asking questions, digging through messages, emails, timelines. That is how she found the truth. That is how she learned her children had been lost, endangered, and then placed in state care. All because her husband wanted to offload his responsibility and frame someone else when it backfired. Her horror was real. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. Her words came in rushed fragments as if saying it out loud made it more monstrous. And in that moment I realized she had been as deceived as I had. She did not yell. She did not demand forgiveness. She simply cried because the man she had built a life with had gambled with their children's safety and had not thought to tell her. When the rest of the family found out, everything shattered. Mark had worked hard for years to maintain the illusion of the perfect, overburdened father who was constantly abandoned by those around him. He had painted himself as the victim, the misunderstood sibling, the one who had been wronged by cold-hearted relatives and a selfish sister. But the truth exploded like glass in a silent room. They all found out. His in-laws who had previously adored him, our cousins who had defended him during the hearings, our aunt who once said I had exaggerated his faults, the grandparents who had been lied about so casually by a man who used them as scapegoats to cover his tracks. One by one they saw the court files, the foster care reports, the child services investigation notes. They saw screenshots, transcripts, the forged messages he created. They saw that he had not only abandoned his children, but also tried to ruin his own sister in the process. His reputation collapsed like wet ash. No one trusted him anymore. His wife moved out and filed for full custody. His old friends distanced themselves quickly and quietly, pretending they had never been close. Colleagues stopped replying to his emails. Invitations stopped coming. The world that had once protected him now turned its back without hesitation. I thought he would disappear into obscurity. I thought I would never hear from him again, But then he began calling me. Desperate voicemails, long rambling texts, plead for forgiveness, cloaked in pitiful excuses. He said he was ruined, said he had no one left, that he had lost everything, that I was the only person who still knew the real him, but I didn't know the real him. That was exactly the problem. I never replied. I did not delete the messages. I saved every one of them because I knew he would find a way to twist the story again if I let him. But I never responded. I owed him nothing. He had tried to destroy me to save himself. And now he stood in the ruins of his own making, begging for help from the same woman he had betrayed without hesitation. Letting him rot in the mess he created was not revenge. It was the natural consequence of a lifetime of manipulation finally coming undone. He wanted someone to clean up his destruction again, but I had spent too long picking up pieces I did not break. So I did nothing. I lived my life. I rebuilt what he tried to take. I volunteered with organizations for at-risk children. I stayed in touch with his kids through the proper channels, made sure they were safe and supported, but I never spoke to him again. That was how I taught him the final lesson, that there are consequences for weaponizing trust, that some bridges burn forever, that sometimes the silence of those you tried to destroy is louder than any courtroom gavel or public scandal, because in the end, all he had left was the echo of his own destruction and the knowledge that I was never coming.